Hello and welcome to this video in which we'll be looking at the questions and the answers of a reading comprehension exercise from CAT 2024 slot 3. In an earlier video, we had read the passage, we had understood what is it that we're supposed to understand from the passage after finishing reading it. So this video, we're going to be going through the questions one by one and seeing that what are their answers and how they can be answered, their level of difficulty as well. So let's go to the questions quickly. The first question asks, the author mentions all of the following reasons to dismiss concerns about contaminating Mars except. So which of these is not mentioned in the passage as a reason to dismiss concerns about contaminating Mars or contaminate or to sterilize uh, aircrafts and spacecrafts before sending them to Mars? Which of these has not been mentioned in the passage by the author is a question. If you look at the options, two options are very easily eliminatable because they are directly given in the passage. A, the author is talking about multiple different times that the life on Mars is completely theoretical. Why are we worried about theoretical life on Mars? And even if if it exists, why do we have to protect it? And even the last sentence of the passage is ending with that question. So A is absolutely not the correct answer. A has been talked about in the passage. Another option that is being definitely talked about in the passage is C. Efforts to contain contamination Mars are likely to be derailed as competitor countries may not follow similar restrictions. Directly in the third paragraph, the author is mentioning countries like China who don't believe in the process of sterilization or protecting planets and other celestial objects from contamination. So C cannot be the answer. B and D can be a bit confusing. Not an easy question from here because both B and D talk about similar things. The first option, option B here, is talking about use of similar probes on astronomical bodies like the moon, and D is talking about earlier explorations. Both of these are, in essence, talking about early explorations to places like the moon. The only difference then is the second half. Second half of option B says have had little effect on the environment, which means that it has not affected their environment much. Whereas D says they have already contaminated the pristine space and environments. So D is saying that those environments have been contaminated. B is saying that these explorations have had little effect. So all I have to decide is, according to the passage, have those environments been contaminated according to the author, or they have, or even without civilization, they have not had much effect. And if I think about it like this, and if I go back to the passage, I can read that part of the passage where NASA had spent the moon mission, where even astronauts' feces were left full of bacteria on the surface of the moon, and they had left the place much worse than what they arrived at. So, which means contamination has happened. Whether it has had effect, whether it has not had effect, that cannot be ascertained. The author is not making that point in the passage. Although we can conclude with the fact that contamination has happened, but they have not had much effect, because if they had effect, the author would not make his point. So B is an inferable option, but D is given directly. For that reason, B will be the correct answer. So I've said this multiple times in my previous videos as well. I will again reiterate the point. Let's see, when I've got two options. One can be logically concluded using the information in the passage beyond the passage, but one has been given in the passage directly. Then the option which is given in the passage directly will be the more correct option according to the passage. So in this case, we're trying to figure out which option is wrong. So D is given directly in the passage. So it is something that the author is talking about directly, that those places are not pristine anymore. And that's why D is not the answer. That's why B is the answer. Difficult question. I won't say this is an easy question by any measure. So one, even if you get wrong, it's fine. But then I feel that you should come down to option B and D. Marking A and C as an answer is a bad mistake to make. Coming to question two, I think is easy. The author's overall tone in the first paragraph can be described as, throughout the passage, the author is having a very negative opinion about the people at NASA who are advocating for sterilization. In fact, in the very first paragraph, he is directly calling them elite. They're running a regime. They have controlled the entirety of NASA. They have incurred NASA extra cost. So we're looking for an option with a negative opinion in it. And there's only one option in which the tone has been characterized with a negative word, and that is skeptical. And that's a B is the correct answer. Approving is incorrect. Equivocal means to say that, oh, this is also right, this is also wrong. So the author is taking a balanced opinion. No, the author is not taking a balanced opinion. The author is not indifferent at all. The author is passionately arguing against that group of scientists who are advocating for sterilization. Let's say C is not the correct answer. It's an easy question. You don't even have to read the rest of the options. You just have to read the first word where the tone has been characterized. Only option with a negative tone is option B. So it's a straightforward mark as the correct answer. Very, very simple question. In fact, question which should not take much time at all. Coming to question 3. 3 says the author is unlikely to disagree with any of the following except. Very, very weirdly worded question. Question itself might not be very difficult. But there are three negatives: unlikely, to disagree, accept. Three negatives make a negative. So we are looking for an option that the author will not agree with. We're looking for an option that the author will not agree with. Unlikely to disagree means likely to agree, accept. So which option will the author disagree with? And if I look at the options, A says the proposal for a zonal segregation of the Martian landscape into different purposes. Last paragraph is point. So A is directly being made by the author, so A cannot be the correct answer. B says while NASA's early missions were not ideal in their approach to space contamination, they likely did no grave damage. So, yeah, the author is saying this, that space contamination was not a very, very big point that the NASA's earlier missions followed. And the author is actually not telling us whether it did great damage or not, but the author is saying, see, they did that earlier. So why not now? So which means it is implied that they did not do any grave damage, but I will still hold on to B because he's not told directly whether they did grave damage or not grave damage, because he's saying contamination did happen, that they still left feces and came back. So maybe B can be the correct answer. But let me read the remaining options to see if there's any option that the author will directly disagree with. That's when C comes in. C says space contamination should be minimized until the possibility of life on the astronomical body being explored is ruled out. This is exact opposite of the primary point that the author is trying to make throughout the passage. The point that the author is trying to make is that don't worry about civilization. You don't have to spend more on it. That it makes no sense. It is going to stop scientific advancement. So C, being opposite of the point that the author is making, makes C easily the correct answer. So this question becomes easy because there's a very simple, straightforward option that the author will disagree with. D also says the exorbitant cost of continuing to keep the space environment pristine may be unsustainable. Exactly the point that the author is making. So D cannot be the answer either. Maybe B, if you read it before C, can confuse you a bit. But there is no way that the author will agree with C, and that's why C will be the correct answer. The only challenge in this question lies in reading and understanding the question very carefully. Remember, that's a very big part of a skill that is tested by CAT papers in general over the course of last few years, that you have to read the questions. And when you have got double negative, triple negative, treat it like a mathematical equation. Minus into minus into minus is minus. If there is a double negative, then it's plus. So here we are trying to look for a negative, which is not present in the passage. C is a clear answer. Fourth question says a contrasting reaction to the Chinese and Israeli contaminations of lunar space. Okay, so why is the author mentioning them? Again, two options are absolutely easily eliminatable. A says our evidence of China's reasonable approach towards space contamination. A does not answer the question because our question is a logical reasoning question. It's a logical structure question rather than asking us to find a link between why does the author present both of this. A only talks about China. Let's say A can be very easily eliminated. B says our valid as contamination of the lunar environment from animal sources is far greater than from plants. Never are animal and plants being compared, so B is not the correct answer. C says reveal global biases prevalent in attitudes towards different countries. So it is talking about countries being biased towards different philosophies. Kind of weirdly worded because it is talking about global biases prevalent in attitudes towards different countries. The author is saying that Israel was rebuked, China was not. So maybe C is being implied. Maybe. But if I read D, D says indicate the national scientists may have different sensitivities to issues of biosafety protection. This is more correct. The author is not writing the passage, giving those two examples to prove how countries treat different countries differently, but rather to say that some countries might follow the rule of contamination, some might not. D is the point that the author is trying to make, and that's why D is the correct answer and C is not. So these are the answers to the questions of this exercise. And this exercise is not particularly easy. So I won't say all questions are easy. I would believe that someone who's good at reading comprehension exercise can still get 3 out of 4 questions correct. I think question number 2 and question number 4 should be correct for most people. But even 4, I think confusion between C and D is a pretty valid kind of a confusion to have. Question number 3 requires us to read the question very, very carefully. One is a difficult question, but still people who are relying on reading comprehension exercises for a good deal of this course should get 3 out of 4 correct. I think people who are taking the paper to sail through VRC should get 2 out of 4 still correct, by this time through taking mocks and practicing reading comprehension exercise sufficiently. These kind of traps that are present in question number 3 should not fall into. I can understand 1 and 4. Discerning which is a correct answer among the last two options, can be a bit of a problem. But I think 2 out of 4 correct is absolutely a possibility if you pay a bit more attention to the questions of the exercise. Thank you.